I'm going to get back to Hugh in a second, but right now we've got Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy on the line with us. Congressman McCarthy, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Thank you for having me, too. It's been a big week in Washington, D.C. for Congress, for both the Senate and the House, particularly the Freedom Act. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the USA Freedom Act, and many people would know about FISA. It's how the government, how do they protect us from terrorism, but at the same time, there was concern to protect our civil liberties, that they had this bulk data where they would have all the numbers. Well, the USA Freedom Act changed that, where no longer could you have the bulk data. Now the service providers keep, if you find that person is an individual that's a terrorist problem, then you're able to follow it. The other part that we were able to do is closing a loophole that when terrorists first entered the country, proposed one, there was like a 72-hour lapse of whether you can follow them. This closes that loop to make sure we would be able to.
Now,
it's a good bill protecting both sides.
Sure. Now, do you view this as kind of a compromise bill? Because the libertarian wing of the Republican Party would say, you know, this doesn't close enough of the quote-unquote loopholes. The more hawkish members of the party would say we're less safe today than we were yesterday.
It is a compromise. You had 338 votes. This is something that inside the House, though, when you really look at this bill, it makes protection stronger, but also protects our civil liberties even more.
Sure. Now, do you see any further reforms to this bill in the future? Are you going to see anyone in your caucus in the House or maybe the Senate trying to further reform or water down the act?
I think people will always be looking at this, but as of right now, we finally got it through. It never came to the point before where it had to lapse like that. The House passed it early. The Senate wasn't able to solve the problem before they departed, and when they came back with their rules, Rand Paul had them extended a little longer, so it took some time for them to get through to the bill.
Sure. Now, one of the things that we're seeing that I think is really interesting in this new version is that it creates a public advocate appointed by the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. I didn't even know we had a Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, so that was news to me. But it would promote privacy interests before some secret court. Can you explain what that's all about?
Well, what happens here is you do have a court that overlooks and oversees, and you have to go before them whether you're able to trace or follow. And there was a concern that, all right, but is there anybody else? The court is appointed throughout. These are judges looking through. Having that advocacy there gives you that other check and balance that people would want. So make sure that all voices are being heard.
Great. Now, let's talk a little bit. Let's switch gears for just a second. Another big issue that's being talked about in Congress, and I know it's on your mind, is trade. What are some of the latest developments in what your proposals are looking like in the House?
Well, I will tell you, if you think of trade and you look at, just think of the last the quarter we just had where they came back and our economy actually shrunk. U.S. trade supports more than 38 million jobs. We know that to get consumption around the world, you got to be engaged in the process. But there's lots of times we're not able to enter that market. And then there becomes a security issue, too. How are we to our allies and others? Trade has been such a positive for America and growth in the economy. But we have to have what is called TPA, Trade Promotion Authority, where you can negotiate. And right now there's a couple trade agreements out there, the Trans Partnership, Pacific Partnership, TPP. And so the Senate has passed TPA. The House is going to be taking that up this month. When we are able to pass that, a lot of the labor unions are opposed to it, so you got a lot of Democrats opposed to this.
But the president, interestingly enough, is in favor of it, right?
He is in favor of it. Every modern president has had this authority. Because think about if you go to negotiate. If you're going to put all these countries together, and are they going to go negotiate with 535 members of the House and the Senate? Or could they negotiate with one person, you get the very best deal, our trade representative, and you bring that to Congress, and then Congress decides whether they support it or not?
Sure. Now, where's the biggest resistance in the House coming from?
Democrats.
All Democrats? You're not having anyone in your own caucus kind of
we
buck
have
the trend?
a few. Well, no, we've got some. There are some in our caucus that are both. They're concerned about. There's an argument saying you're giving the president authority. Every president administration had this authority. It's a trade representative to go. But think about this. Think about what's happening in the Pacific realm right now. Are we going to be the leaders there with our allies, Japan and others, expanding trade, or is China going to be the one to do that? There is a real difference here about where we're able to lead. If you look at those that we've had trade agreements with, we actually have a surplus in manufacturing with those that we have trade agreements with. Those we don't have one. If the majority of consumption is outside the United States, but we're able to produce. Think about where our energy costs are today. Think about our ability within trade to manufacture and build here. We can really grow a lot of American jobs through trade.
Nancy Pelosi has been kind of back and forth, a little wishy-washy on whether she'll vote yes, whether she'll vote no. I'm sure that a big part of your job is getting Ms. Pelosi to get her Democrats in line on this. What are the major sticking points for the Democrats on voting in favor of this?
They have just been sitting out there. The argument with the labor unions opposed to the competition, and I think it's going to make America actually stronger. So you have many of the most liberal Democrats fighting this strongly.
So, this is actually, from a political standpoint, pretty interesting, right? Because over the last 6 or so years, or 5 years, 5.5 years, President Obama and at least the House have been at odds with each other, and Republicans haven't been able to partner with Obama on much of anything. But with both the Freedom Act and trade, it seems like there's a coming around, and there's some commonalities between Obama and the new leadership of the GOP in both the House and Senate, and he's having struggles with his own party. Are you seeing that playing out in your discussions?
I see it playing out, but remember, when President Obama was a senator, he was opposed to TPA. When he became a president, he realized what it meant to the entire United States. And one thing that you see when we go through this, even though the president in the past said he supported it, he would have Harry Reid come in. Harry Reid said he would be opposed to it, and he'd never even really lobby him and push Harry Reid. Now that the Senate has changed, you got a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Now is the time to get this done. And the difference that we made in negotiating a TPA agreement is it gives greater transparency, more accountability, and it has more checks for Congress and the Senate to make sure it's done properly.
Is it fair to say that this is a bridge of sorts that's helping maybe cool the relationship a little bit between House Republican leadership and Senate Republican leadership in the White House?
Well, I mean, this is something Republicans have always believed in, and we're going to get it done. I think the administration's beginning to realize when they see the growth in America going downward, when they had 7 years to try to make this country grow, and it has not. From that standpoint, this is an opportunity to shake it up and get the country growing again.
I want to talk about growth in a second and the GDP, but just to stay on this point for a second. Obviously, a lot of people, when they think about President Bush and they think about President Obama, they yearn for those years where it was the Gingrich Congress and Bill Clinton, and a lot of people have said, or a few people have said, I should say, that maybe there's an opportunity in these last 2 years of his presidency for this president to kind of have that Bill Clinton turnaround and work with the leadership of the Republican Party, both in the House and Senate. And a few people, like I said, have been pointing to both this trade discussion and obviously the Freedom Act is examples of that. Are you seeing that, or are relationships still a little bit chilly?
It's still difficult. I mean, this president's a little different than the others. The others would engage in the process, try to find common ground. This president usually starts with he just wants this and to start out with. But I've seen some movement now, and remember, the president is now in a different position than he has a Republican House and a Republican Senate. So we're able to send stuff to his desk now. That's different. Now, if we had seen a lot of change, don't you think he would have signed our bill on Keystone? You've got a bipartisan vote in the House and Senate with Democrats joining with us, sending to the president, but the president vetoed it. So I still think there's a lot of places he can find common ground with us if he looks at things a little differently.
Thank you very much, Congressman Kevin McCarthy, Majority Leader of the United States House of Representatives. Thanks for your time.